Coming to you from UBN Studios in Burbank, California, you are listening to the Unsugarcoated Podcast with your host, Aalia.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Unsugarcoated with Aalia podcast, where we really try to knock your socks off with some empowerment. So here I go with a little bit of my intro. It was a midsummer's night, 1937. World-famous African-American performer and activist Paul Robeson stood on a stage at London's Royal Albert Hall after receiving a plea to support an anti-fascist fundraiser endorsed not only by the labor movement, but also by writers, artists, and musicians. Cecil Day Lewis and H.G. Wells are just a couple of the significant names of that era. His words were not minced when he spoke. The son of a slave implored every ear to listen, not knowing the real magnitude of devastation that would come from World War II, which began less than 2 years later in 1939. It was a warning. And one of my favorite parts about writing my last novel, Yugin, was actually traveling to London and sitting in the Royal Albert Hall and experiencing in my mind what it might have been like to hear him that night. He stole the show with these words: "Every artist, every scientist, every writer must decide now where he stands. There is no standing above the conflict on Olympian heights. There are no impartial observers. The battlefront is everywhere." Now that was code for do not put your head in the sand, okay, everybody? And let me explain to you, boy, did he turn out to be right. And it stood out to me that he called on fellow creatives. As a creative myself, I see our influence on society, and that comes with a responsibility. For me, I see that unique opportunity to wrap a message of humanitarianism within our art, and I'm all about that. People who know me and what we are about here at Unsugarcoated Media know that we genuinely are interested in educating, bridging gaps, and it makes me very proud to be a creative in that sense. So with that being said, in an effort to, speak to people who give voice for the voiceless, I'm very, very excited to bring on an amazing father-son duo today, okay? So let's start with Antonio. In 1994, Antonio Pelayo joined Disney Studios' illustrious ink and paint department, where he learned traditional celluloid animation techniques. Once big enough to occupy the majority of the Disney studio lot, the department had survived the advent of digital animation as a tiny one-room holdover from the golden era of American animation. In this room, amidst some 4,000 different types of paint and inks, Antonio found shelter. Working for a company that had always valued creativity, raw talent, and imagination, he flourished. And through exhibitions organized by the studio to showcase the work of its employees, Antonio had his first brush with the notion that his works could be framed, hung on a wall, and exhibited in such a way that they could have a direct and powerful impact on an audience. And boy, has he. But born in Glendale, California, and raised for most of his childhood in the Mexican countryside, experiences caused him to find solace in art as he sought out the work of other Mexican artists. In 2005 was his first art show. A new chapter in Antonio's career had begun, and he has since continued to combine his creative and unique talents as an artist and tastemaker to create new types of cultural experiences. Ladies and gentlemen, Antonio Pelayo. And we have your son, so fine artist, Isaac Pelayo. Isaac Pelayo's hyper-realistic aesthetic expressions are a mixture of classical painting, enlightenment, and pop culture. Inspired just as much by Da Vinci, Rembrandt, Dali as by the Renaissance, Baroque period, and the street art movement, as the son of a renowned fine artist, Antonio Pelayo Jr., who early on exposed him to the arts. At age 11, Isaac exhibited his work in a gallery for the first time. And today, only a decade later, at 23 years old, he works at the ink and paint department for Disney alongside with his father. Isaac's artwork has graced multiple publications such as LA Weekly, Inked Mag, Voyage LA, and even landing the cover of Latino Heritage Month Calendar and Cultural Guide, published by the Department of Cultural Affairs of the City of Los Angeles. Isaac's works has landed in the collections of Sean Diddy Combs, Shepard Fairey, Jeff Hamilton, West Side Gun, and Haspin, just to name a few out there. With exhibitions at various museums around the globe, including the Museum of Latin American Art in Long Beach and the Trotsky Museum at Mexico City. We are very grateful to have you both here, Antonio and Isaac.
Thank you.
I kind of like, I'm like, the applause you can see. Okay, so listen, guys, thank you so much. First of all, Antonio, I have to say, we've known each other now. We were just laughing. It's been 6 years that we've known each other.
Yeah.
So we have a picture for the visual audience of Antonio and I. It's
Oh,
not
wow.
the greatest, like we're at a party. We're at a business event, and there we are. Look at us. I was so much thinner then, by the way.
Dallas, right?
Nah, that was St. Louis, I think. It was a white party.
Oh, it was.
I've
St.
never
Louis.
seen
Yeah.
you wear so much white before.
I know, it was
That was
required.
the first time.
I know. I had a hard time. I swear.
Yeah.
It's when you have to go to a white party and find something to wear, then you
I
can't
know.
find anything white, right? So we've known each other a minute, and when I first met you, I didn't realize I was standing in the presence of Antonio Pelayo. Share with us a bit about your background and what makes you, what makes you the incredible artist you are today. I see you are wearing your son's work. Is that T-shirt
That's
your
right.
son's? See? Oh, man. Okay, so the visual audience and the audio audience, we're going to tell you where to go get some amazing merchandise, by the way, I'm assuming. But, yeah, tell us what's brought you to where you are today.
Man, to make a long story short, I've been drawing since I was probably 2-3 years old. I was maybe 3-4 when I first heard my preschool teacher tell my mom that I was going to be an artist. We used to live in Highland Park, and our preschool was right across the street from our house. And then when it was over, I remember my teacher coming over, and she was talking to my mom, and I heard her say, "Oh, when this kid grows up, he's going to be an artist." So I continued drawing. In elementary school, my teachers used to take me around the 6th graders, show them my work, and then moving to Mexico when I was about 8 years old. In Mexico, I didn't really have any friends due to us being Jehovah's Witnesses over there. We were sent by our dad because he didn't agree, my mom being a Jehovah's Witness. So that was his plan, to send us to their small town there where everyone's Catholic, to hopefully have the pressure of the family make my mom go back to being a Catholic. So during that time, I had no friends. As a Jehovah's Witness, you're not allowed to, hang out with anyone other than being, if you're a Jehovah's Witness. So what I did was, I drew a lot. Turned 16, came back from Mexico. And then at that time, I started imagining, visualizing myself working at Disney, because we used to live right down the street from it. I used to ride my bike around the lot and imagine myself working for Disney as an artist, having no idea of what positions existed or nothing like that. And then a couple years after, when I was 19, through a temp agency, they got me it was supposed to be a 5-day thing at Disney. And those 5 days turned into 26 years now.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And for people who are watching, your son is here. He's quite recognizable, I know, on TikTok. You are the OG. You're the father. And I love it because when you talk about your father, you never stood, you embrace it. And I love that. And I want you to share, how you as an artist, you have this dad, and he's and I want to go into the detail of what you do, I know, but you've grown up with his artist influence, and obviously he let you be. How did that affect your journey as an artist?
Man, it's a good question because there's so much history that goes into this whole road. I mean, when I was a kid, all I've ever known my dad to do was art. I grew up with my mom, living with my mom, but every time I was with my dad, it was always art galleries, museums, fairs, auctions, going to visit art studios, some of the most legendary artists here in LA, like Magoo, part of Los Fort, right?
Mm-hmm.
So seeing studios like that when I was 7, 8, that played a real big role in my drive for art. And obviously I picked up pencil right away. My dad never painted, but I think it was better that, I started off with pencil, because when I transitioned into painting right out of college, it was an easy transition. It wasn't really that hard. But yeah, I think his work has definitely influenced my work. in the aspect of me wanting to capture people. My dad's way of capturing people is it's not really like your everyday portrait. It's not like taking a photograph, and it's not like drawing someone. Kind of, he's always had this sort of energy that he captures people's innocence and some sort of vulnerability. And that's kind of real. When you look at a portrait, when you could see someone's vulnerability, that's you can sense a little more emotion out of that opposed to a regular portrait. So I try to do that in my own work today. Mm-hmm. I try to capture the vulnerability and the things that people don't necessarily want to expose of themselves. I think that's like the realest form of a portrait.
Right.
So, and being a portrait, we're portrait artists. I mean, we capture people. And oftentimes we incorporate a lot of inanimate objects with our work to kind of tell a broader story behind the people that we're portraying.
Right.
So.
Right. Which is very powerful. When you talk, I almost envision you a little bit like because of the different techniques, I would imagine it just makes you more of like an orchestra leader in some way, not in music, but like when you're a producer and you know a piano and you know how to play the guitar and like you have, it just makes you more, evolved as an actual artist. You are quoted as saying, I know your quote is, I've tried speaking to Antonio, I've tried landscapes and fantasy scenes, but it's the portrait that fascinates me, that intimacy between the subject and the artist, the vulnerability that the subject must have to my interpretation. That is trust, and it's most divine. I love that you say that. So when you're doing a portrait, like, what is that process like for you?
In a way, it's kind of like therapy. It could be like a self-reflection thing, a deeper understanding of the person that I'm drawing. Whether it's Frida Kahlo or my neighbor, it's that connection. So yeah,
which is very interesting because I know as a creative, I'm writing stories and I kind of like to change things to make it mine. You in portraits, you're taking your subject and you're actually duplicating. You're catching things and you're looking so deep and intense. I can imagine it's very it's very hot. I'm not gonna lie. It's very sexy. It's very beautiful and it's very intense. I love it. I want to talk about how the cultural influence and what you guys are doing. I know I have a post that you had put, and now I'm like, why am I not finding the actual? Oh wait, yes, here I have it. Okay, so you have a post that was on Instagram, and I snagged it because in it you say, I grew up understanding the hard work street vendors put into making an honest living, all while providing excitement and joy to our communities. When I was a child, I remember waiting for the ice cream man to stroll by. The American dream, ... Please respect and show love to these men and women who aren't harming anyone. They are part of what makes LA culture one of a kind. I really wanted to bring this up because we see a lot of aggression towards the Latino community. And so you guys just don't draw pretty pictures to make it simple. You guys go out there. Your events really focus on the Latin community, LatinX, and share with us, what inspired you to write? I know what inspired, but tell me like a little bit more of the behind the scenes on what went into that for you.
Well, the whole body of work was from a show that we had earlier this year that was supposed to take place right before Corona happened. But, my dad has always created work documenting his family and friends, immigrants migrating from Mexico to the United States, and the story in between. And that body of work was sort of highlighting the story of them being here. Hispanics immigrants come to the States to find some sort of freedom, solitude, some honest way of living. And I felt, I knew it meant something to my dad too, to kind of step up and be a part of documenting that whole culture. I grew up both in LA and Riverside, and there's always been vendors in both cities. So I grew up with eloteros and vendors, people selling oranges and stuff like that on my street corner. fruit and ice cream and things like that. And those things, you know, as a kid, I didn't really understand politics, but you know, as a kid, all I know is to perceive that as a person making an honest living and making kids happy in the block. And it's just shameful to see that people are disrespecting people who are here to try to make a decent dollar and, you know, provide for their kids and for their families. And they're doing it in such a way that's so innocent and quiet in just this little corner of the earth, you know,
Right.
not bothering anybody. And as an artist, most of my work tends to reflect pop culture, things of influenced by, you know, European art and street art. But I felt responsible to focus on something a little more important at hand,
Right.
something that we're seeing here in LA with all the discrimination. And it's not just Hispanic people, you know,
Right.
everybody's seeing discrimination, black people especially. The black community is another subject that, you know, I, as an artist, I should focus more on creating work talking about that subject because, you know, a painter can definitely stir up a conversation. And I feel widely responsible to stir up a conversation that's more relevant to what's happening opposed to what's you know, the things that I want to talk about. You know, so that it was just a responsibility thing.
Right.
I felt responsible.
Well, I hope you guys can understand that's why I tied in my opening remarks about Paul Robeson, a creative calling on other creatives to not just stand by and do nothing, because there is power in what we do and what you guys do, obviously. And you have, you know, you've actually, it's been said about you both in a Washington Report, I believe it said, Antonio Pelayo and Isaac Pelayo collide various depiction of the experiences of the members of their own people, utilizing their artwork as a platform to visually convey the realities of the Latinx community. So you're doing that. And then, like you said, because you went out for BLM protests, and that's actually on the notes because, you know, I guess I want to take a step back from that and say, what inspires you as creatives to use your gift to bring about awareness and advocate, especially for the Latinx community? Excuse me.
Want to take this one?
Well, like you said, it's pretty much responsibility. As artists, what we create, we know that it moves people. So, you know, we're not claiming or saying that our work is going to move a multitude of people, but it has motivated and inspired a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, we've been in the game for a very long time with the exhibits that we do.
Right.
We constantly get parents telling us, "Oh, you know, you inspire my kid," and we never even met them. You know,
Right.
from across the globe, actually. And then the events that we started producing 10 years ago, there's a lot of good things that come out of that,
Right.
especially inspiration.
So El Velorio is what you're talking about?
El Velorio,
Yeah.
La Bulla.
Yeah, those are two huge events that you
Mhm.
put on, that you started, and you've had celebrity support from, you know, Trejo,
Yeah.
you know, and you have, you know, created something for that community. I know everyone gets excited, and you have the art aspect, and then you have just the like hanging out and networking and growing together as a community. So now, you know, when you're looking at what we're seeing with BLM, and we are the allies as people who are non-blacks, but people of color, people who do understand what being marginalized or being looked at a certain way because of the color of your skin. How have you found yourself working to be an ally to that movement? And I do have a picture of you. I think we have a picture of Isaac at the protest.
I couldn't tell who was who for a
I
second.
know.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
and I mean, you guys are out there. I was out there, I think, the same day, right? That was the day,
Yeah,
Saturday
yeah.
in Hollywood,
Yeah.
and 20,000 people came
Yeah.
out. And, you know, I brought my 3.5-year-old out there and my husband, and
Mm-hmm.
we were in support of an idea that racism is wrong,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How do you feel the Latin community, and we got to be real and candid about this because it is part of the conversation. I know in my family, it was very, and I've been around, like, you know, brown people can be racist too.
Oh yeah. This whole COVID situation has brought has revealed a lot of racist people. And unfortunately, yes, some of my family and some of my friends,
Yeah.
some people in my network, they just...
I mean, maybe some people will feel better if I just say uneducated on certain things, right? Because that's really my thing. Like, stop, take a minute, get to know somebody and understand their story. Just because they're standing on a street corner selling you a freaking fruit, it doesn't make them any less of a person with integrity or beauty in their soul. What do you feel works for the Latin community and what doesn't when it comes to BLM?
Oh, that's a hard one to answer.
I mean, I feel like you educate through your art. I mean, and I feel like it starts with education to some degree. And and by the way, and I mean, I'm not trying to like go off topic, but I do want to make sure to the audience and point out you too are one of the final inkers with Disney. You've been there for a very long time.
We're some of the few left.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to discredit anyone who's still there. And they're like, wait a minute, I'm here too. No, of course. But I mean, so I know I just threw that in there. Sorry, guys. But like, wait, because my brain is going a million ways. Because this is a delicate topic for people in our situation. We want to do good. We want to be better. We don't always say the right things. We don't always do the right things, right? But it is important that we create change. I think you guys are definitely doing it with the events. How does your events, do you have plans on expanding it? Because I know it's definitely very LatinX focused. Do you guys...
It's Latin focused as far as the tradition that's being celebrated. But ever since I launched the first one, I've always labeled it multicultural.
Okay.
Meaning I invite all the cultures to participate. For example, the Day of the Dead, other cultures celebrate that as well. So, for example, I want to invite a Filipino, show me how you celebrate Day of the Dead, and be part of this conversation. Caucasians, I've had every single nationality participate in my events. Yes, Day of the Dead is a Mexican, it's a tradition that was born in Mexico, but I like to get everyone involved.
Yeah.
I'm all about inclusion.
Well, there you go. That's your answer.
Yeah.
Like, that was the answer. I think that's like, and you do that. I love that you've been doing it. And as far as I've always known you, you have a multitude. You're not like a person who's just hanging out with the Latin community.
No.
You're friends with everyone. You are out there really develop. You're the younger, not the younger version of Antonio, but you are his son.
If he was a little bit taller.
Well, do you kind of look at his life and see the benefit? Like, come on, we're 40-somethings, right?
Yeah.
So we're looking at these kids with all their social media platform and ability, and we're like, man, if we would have had that, we could have ruled the world, right?
Well, here's the funny part. When I started exhibiting my work, I was 33, and that's when MySpace was kind of hot,
right.
And I never wanted to join. I'm like, dude, I don't want to be part of that.
MySpace was not hot 10 years ago. You got to go back.
No, I'm 47.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, when you started. Okay, that makes sense.
I was 33.
Okay, gotcha.
And graffiti artist Retna that gave me my first show, he told me, he's like, hey, dude, you need to join MySpace so you can get your work out there. And I'm like, oh, man, what's that? And then I, reluctantly, I joined, and it kind of took off. And
But
then Facebook.
Yeah. Well, those were the
Instagram.
early, that is fair. You did it at 30. See, I wasn't, by the time I got onto MySpace, I wasn't doing anything that needed to be promoting. I was still. But, I mean, for you, so you have a social platform. Actually, and I'm going to bring it up. I know it's not even in my notes. And it's not even in my notes. And I meant to mention it to my publicist because my publicist, of course, she loves you. She's Mexican-American. She's like one of your biggest fans. And
I was chatting with her earlier.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She loves you guys. She's so excited. She was so happy that we were going to be doing this. But there was something that you had posted, and I remember people went freaking crazy about it. That was not too long ago. Can you remember what I'm talking about? And are you able to talk about it?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Because I can't remember it. I just remember it was like.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, okay, let's just speak to the complexities of social media. You can be well-intended, I believe, and stuff can just be completely blown out of proportion.
Well, I've done a few things that's pissed quite a few people off.
I would imagine.
In the name of art.
Right.
Yeah, I know exactly what situation you're talking about. And it was last year, I want to say. I think it was last year, yeah. Very early on last year. And if it wasn't last year, it was 2018. I forget. I've tried to forget about that moment. But yeah, I got commissioned by one of my good friends who's a rapper, pretty big artist too. I mean, he's with Rock Nation. And I got commissioned to do an album cover. The subject matter was pretty controversial, but knowing who the commissioner is, and knowing his story behind the subject matter, I understood it, and I did it for that reason. But a lot of people didn't agree with it. But, a lot of people don't know how to read art. That's the problem.
Right.
There's a lot of people who look at art and they judge it by what they're seeing, and not by doing research and really letting the subject sink in, and by how they feel. Mm-hmm. People tend to judge too quick, and kind of, a lot of people just want to have an opinion and say shit. But yeah, like I mean, social media has been one of those things. It's been a good thing and a bad thing, because there's a lot of people who, say this and that about me, but I have a lot of supporters on there too, so it's been both good and bad.
Right.
And that situation was an interesting one, because I got a lot of heat from it. I mean, I had so much heat. My Instagram account had never been I hadn't had so many impressions. Mm-hmm. Like, I had I think 500,000 people visit my profile, and just in the span of a couple days, something like that. Yeah, it was a ton of people, and celebrities were looking at my story. Some people were just sharing stories about me. But now, I think people understand that I'm a controversial artist. Right. I did a piece in protest of our president, and that piece was derived and inspired through street art, and I made the art public. And the piece kind of took a life of its own, and it stirred up a big conversation. I know a lot of people who are Trump supporters, and they are hardcore Republican. I don't really consider myself Democrat or Republican. I'm just an artist.
Right.
I know what's right and I know what's wrong, but I had a lot of people who were Trump supporters come at me for that piece too, and that was. Wasn't just so much talking about him. It was the conversation that I wanted to start, was that you could use art to stir up a conversation that's more relevant. Art is this powerful. It can piss someone off, or it can make someone laugh.
It moves people.
It does. It does. I mean, it does. I love that you guys are artists. I mean, as a writer, when people write me and say, your book made me bawl my eyes out, I'm like, yes. Because I that's what the purpose was, right? I wanted you to feel something. If you didn't feel something, then I'm not doing as good of a job as I want to. And we don't stand alone. I was talking about Hamilton. I love Hamilton. I'm obsessed with, I love the music. I love the creativity. It's art. But look, so many people have negative things to say about it. People want to nitpick and put on these technicalities. And if you don't understand, that's not how art works. We're not trying to defend every single thing. We're just giving a perspective, or we're giving this, and we're seeing things, at least for me, with my words, I'm trying to paint an alternate perception for someone.
Well, that's what makes an art piece a masterpiece. If you get a negative and a positive, and different perspectives on both spectrums, that's what makes that piece a masterpiece. If you create a piece that no one talks about,
right,
it didn't do its work.
Exactly.
I think that's why his events are so successful too, because a lot of people debate about it.
Right.
They have their opinions on. I would say that there's more good. I've heard more good about the events that my dad puts together than bad, for sure, but they're good because people talk about them. They talk about the events are mentioned in people's interviews and podcasts all over the place, and there's always a debate on whether it's true to the culture, true to this, true to that, et cetera, et cetera. So the conversation it's alive. It's taking a life of its own.
Yeah, I've been called culture vulture.
Culture vulture. What does that mean for people who don't know what that means?
Well,
because I'm not a culture vulture. I don't know what it is. I just know I'm not it.
I think what it is.
Oh wait, yes, I do know what it is. But go ahead.
For example, a Caucasian person creating a Day of the Dead event, so they're making money off of another culture.
They're appropriating the culture.
Yeah. I mean,
and
I used to kind of
give.
it's exactly. whenever people jump on bandwagons, even, or, if you haven't, like, I love it when Shakira backs the Lebanese side of her, because I'm like, don't just get money off the hips, don't lie, if you're not also, promoting who you are. And which she does to give her to be fair. I want to actually go back to something that you had said, though, really quick, because your mural you did, so street art, and I have a photo of that as well. You did a mural of Kobe. And Gigi, yes, and no, it was just Kobe, right? Just okay, Kobe, and it was one of the things that was not damaged during the protests.
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons why. One, it being in the valley. Two, I just think I think a lot of people had more common sense and more respect to stoop so low and deface a mural of someone who had nothing to do with anything that's going on. And I think I had faith in people, and I'm really glad that people didn't do anything. I haven't seen one mural that was defaced or damaged in any sort of way.
Not here. I've seen murals defaced in other places.
Kobe
obviously.
Murals?
Maybe not Kobe, but just murals about Black Pride or things like that. During the protests. Yeah, I'm saying.
The thing is, the funny thing about Kobe is that right now what we're seeing is a very two-sided political thing. Very Democratic, very Republican. But if we reverse just the moment when Kobe passed, I mean, you had Republicans and Democrats both fighting for Kobe's name and putting Kobe out there. I don't think there's not really many people that don't like Kobe, and they don't like him because they know he's amazing.
Yeah.
So even if you were someone who is someone that was against this whole movement, they even have that respect for Kobe not to do that, which is pretty intense to be able to have that power over people.
Yeah, it speaks to his legacy. It speaks to the legacy he left. And he also had his creative spurts that he wanted to do, and he got into. Yeah,
that documentary he produced.
I know,
amazing.
I know. I could be on here all day talking about Kobe. We love him. I think his LA, people, and how can you, like you said, you could not like the Lakers, but you were still going to respect Kobe like Kobe,
we have a group chat of, basketball, and it's always like talking about this person hated Kobe, but he hated him because he loved him deep down. They're so good.
Yeah, I was pulling my phone up so you can see my screensaver. It's Gigi. It's that one.
Yeah.
And I have Gigi as my screensaver.
And man, Gigi was gonna be so good.
I know, a lot there, but so, okay, going back to the event, because as to segue back into like what you said, what you do, Velorio celebrated its 10-year anniversary. It was featured in LA Weekly. What do you see the next year looking like, given with COVID? I mean,
well, I was hoping that I'd be able to at least do the VIP reception, but I just canceled that a couple weeks ago due to a lot of restrictions. Sure. So I said I'm just not going to do anything this year.
Yeah.
So it's going to be until next year, till next November. Yeah.
And I feel, because even the event that I host for empowering and speaking to survivors of trauma and all this, just what we do to try and create those good things they're needed. So when we don't have them, but we know that they're so needed, what do you feel the Latin community, what do you implore the Latin community to do in the meantime? And what would you like to, you're an artist, you want to inspire them with your art. What do you, right now, this moment, what do you want them to be inspired to do and be?
Man, right this second, I'm like so focused on social justice and anti-Trump, if I can say that.
We're not a political show, but listen, people need to understand, especially I think from a creative, just because you don't like, I have a hard time explaining to people, I just don't like Trump. Yeah. It's not about, I love my country. I want everything to work out.
That's how a lot of people interpret it. Like, when they hear us be against Trump, oh, you're not a patriot. You don't love this country. Why don't you go back to your country? It has nothing to do with that.
Well, half the time I want to shake him and be like, baby, you deserve better too. You're not seeing it. It's not that I don't want him because I think he's bad for me. I think he's bad for all of us. And I know that people may be upset when I'm that honest, but listen, you're allowed to vote for him. I'm not here, the person trying to convince you necessarily. I'm going to give you my input. And I feel like going back to my introduction, you have times in history where creatives have stood and said, hey, everybody, pay attention.
Well, here's what happened ever since the George Floyd incident that changed me somehow inside. I never, people always told me and they advised, don't get involved in politics. You have a company, don't take a side, because the minute you take a side, it's gonna backfire. It might backfire. You're gonna get a lot of oppositions, and yeah, that's happened. But you know what? At the end of the day, to me, it's about doing the right thing. It's about fighting for social justice. I've taken a lot of heat on social media. It got to a point where, man, it was making me sick, and I had to take a break. But I didn't take a break, so I just continued to voice it. But a whole lot of people have said to me, "I'm glad that you're speaking up," because I noticed a lot of other people and artists, they're not doing it.
Right.
And I'm like, dude, you have a big platform.
Right.
You could do some good,
right.
especially for our community. So that's the main reason why. And I'm so focused on it until November 3rd. I'm going to keep on that.
Yeah. And just to be clear, and I'm going to ask you, the side, quote unquote, that I am picking is humanity.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's actually not a political side.
Like Isaac said, we're both not Republican or Democrat.
Right.
We're both for social justice, for doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's the list of this side is so clear, and the list of the other side is so clear. It cannot be clear.
Right.
Do the right thing.
Right.
And that's what we're about.
What have been the moments that you've been most inspired by your dad?
Well, not much.
The way I dress.
Every so often.
The way I dress.
Yeah. Man, he makes some pretty good peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I'll say that. That's a fact, though, and that's not even a joke.
And chicken soup.
Yeah.
Who makes better chicken soup, me or your mom?
This is a debate. This debate has gotten political in our household. I think there's a lot of things. I think I'm inspired by how quick he can be inspired by a situation and actually say something about it. As I'm 24, in my 24 years of being my dad's son, I've never seen him get involved in any political conversation, in any type of, siding with anybody. But, when he does, he's always gotten inspired by an event and will say something about it. And recently, this whole George Floyd thing happening, that really sparked a new inspiration. And he didn't stand back and just watch. He actually is saying things. And I think that people gain a lot more respect in that right. And I think, people, it's like his events, in a way, he's always displayed this sort of fight for equality because his events do that. They invite everyone. When I go to the events, I see Black communities, Hispanic communities, white communities, Asian communities, Middle Eastern, all of it. Mm-hmm. And they all interpret their own thing when they're creating the artwork for the gallery. When they're doing work for Day of the Dead, they interpret it in their own way. But it's still Day of the Dead. And we're introducing a Hispanic tradition, and they love it as much as we are welcoming their traditions. And it's just a pot, and we're just mixing all these different cultures, and it's about accepting other people, accepting ourselves, loving other people, being inspired by new things. And I think that him doing those things and bringing all these people together, that's inspiring to me. Because I grew up, my little brother is Black, my mom's other son. My dad's older sister's children are Black. We have Asian cousins. My mom's ex-husband was Middle Eastern. Mm-hmm.
Armenian.
My sister is Armenian. We've had cultures around us since the beginning of time for us. And I've never discriminated against anyone. I've never wanted to be involved in anybody. I never not wanted anyone to be involved with me. And everything that I do, I try to inspire everybody.
Right.
My collectors, I love when I get collectors and they're different people from all over the world, and they have their own interpretation of the work. And, it's just inspiring others.
Yeah, in fact, inspiring others. You guys have, and I'm going to touch on two things. That George Floyd thing, remember if I ask you, and then we have a picture for the audience. Your audio audience, you are missing out, because we have a picture that you guys remade of when you were an infant, Isaac. So this is a side by side. They recreated an image where Antonio is holding, how old are you in that picture, Isaac?
Oh, probably, one?
Not even one.
Yeah.
And he's got a towel up. He must have just gotten out of the bathtub. Let's paint the picture for the audio. Mm-hmm. And then to the other side, you now have done. How old were you? 20.
I was probably 22.
22.
This was because this is when I moved back. So it must have been between 21 and 22. Yeah, between there. So about 20 years later.
Yeah, you're 20. Grown. You're actually probably almost taller than your dad.
It's so funny, and it's the same jersey.
It's the same jersey. I still have it.
You guys were able to, if you really look at it at first glance, you think it's the exact same background and everything, but I just think, except now we have the tattoo, of course, but wow, I love this, and you guys got so much love on social media about it. I thought it was really cute.
This photo has been the one that's gotten the most attention from our both our social medias.
And we'll give your handles out so people know where to go and look at them, because it's great. But I just
love those sideburns.
It just shows your connection. It shows your connection and devotion to each other as father and son, and I love that. And just to really quick in the last few minutes, this whole George Floyd thing, those words to me, I think, again, I want to really re-emphasize going back to not missing that part. As the brown community, we often look at the black community, and it's like, okay, we're all dealing with stuff, right? If you're a minority, you're dealing with your own. Like, I deal with it as a Muslim American. I've dealt with my own share of what that's like, and being told certain things because of whatever, and stereotyping. And obviously, immigrant and brown community get a lot of flack. Now, having seen the George Floyd, I know for a lot of people just seeing the cruelty and the death, and even the people coming out now saying that there's been and this wasn't racist motivated. No, I still call BS on that, because you don't treat people like that unless you have a disregard for who they are as a human being. The man was pleading. There was no need for a gun to come out, right? So without rehashing the George Floyd in general, let's just talk about the concept of how we see police treating people of color. But, and I'm not saying that some white people don't get knocked, or non-blacks don't get arrested or get tased every so often, but in comparison. So now you have the Latino community who's usually trying to stay in their own lane. The history of Latinos here in Los Angeles in the 40s, you had to keep your head down. You crossed the street when you saw a white person walking up.
It's still going on.
It still goes on, where people don't feel confident in who they are. And so this whole George Floyd thing, as artists and as brown people, like, what do you think about that? I know what you're doing, but again, to the Latin community, like, let's hone in on what you feel we should be doing more as an ally to the BLM movement.
Well, I think we should support it. It's been pretty insane. Like I said earlier, it's revealed a lot of bad stuff.
But what are the conversations we should be having with Latinos? You know what I mean? Because I feel that so many fear for their own, getting in trouble. So how do we band together and support the communities? I'm not even saying that we have the answer right now. I'm not going to lie. This is part of that conversation part that I'm talking about. Not maybe we have the answer, but we have the desire. I know I have a desire for our communities to be more open and accepting and stop being so judgmental, and then also not be afraid to stand up for one another.
Yeah, it's a very complicated subject, especially this second. Very interesting, because on one side you have a lot of people supporting it, and we say that the racism does exist, and then the other side says, and even Latinos and blacks say, that racism does not exist.
Right.
And so there's that situation, which is very hard to comprehend.
Right.
Like, probably out of everything that's going on right now, that right there is one thing that I just can't wrap my head around it. It's just so insane to me. I think the best thing that we can do is lead by example and continue supporting what we believe in, which is do the right thing. As artists, support that. I think that goes a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also a lot of Latin, and I know we have only a couple minutes left, but there's a lot of hardworking Latin Americans, and I call them Latin Americans still. If you're in DACA, what do you say to a lot of Latins that are afraid right now for their uncertainty in this country? Like you were born here and then you went back to Mexico, and you talk about that experience. Like there are people who have been raised here and who are now maybe having to go back to their home country, whether it's Mexico or anywhere else, if for the DACA program. What is your what are your words of hope and inspiration for them with what the Latin community is dealing with? Because I want to acknowledge the Latin community often right now feels like there's an X on their back. We just celebrated El Paso, 1 year anniversary of, or I shouldn't say celebrated, excuse me, wrong words. We just recognized the 1 year anniversary of that attack on immigrants, specifically Latinos, in a Walmart in El Paso a year ago. So we're dealing with this ugliness, this target on Latins. How do you, what are your words of hope and inspiration for them?
We need to keep our heads up and unite to fight things like this. It comes down to fighting against it. Right. We need to all rise up and stand up against it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of Latin Americans are kind of some are being very rebellious when rebelling and there's a way to do it and a way not to do it. You like you said, uniting and coming together and really just displaying what it is to be an honest, proud, equal, loving American citizen, to display that and lead by example. I think that alone can make a big difference because there's a generation gap. I think that you said earlier, you asked what are a lot of things that Latin communities can be doing. You have a generation that are far more old school, and their values and morals are different from the younger generation. And I think there's a gap, and some parents probably, there's just differences. There's a lot of differences, and there aren't really time for differences. We're all experiencing the same thing. So that unity is extremely vital.
Right. Because I feel like we've been seeing it in generations before. We know it's been there. We know our families, but now it's time. And I applaud, the generations that are coming now and us saying like, hey, I mean, we're the latchkey kids from the 90s and we got, then we got you guys like, yeah, hopefully there's promise. I feel that it's so important. And what you guys are doing makes a huge difference. For our listening audience, where can they catch you on Instagram, Isaac?
My handle is Isaac Pelayo. That's ISAACPELAYO.
Antonio?
Antonio Pelayo.
At Antonio Pelayo. You know what, guys? Thank you so much for coming and being part of this and, my journey. I love you both and appreciate you. Everyone, we will see you guys on next week. And stay tuned for me, Aalia, at Aalia_unsugarcoated on IG. Send your comments, YouTube, everything. We love you. We appreciate you. We'll see you next week. Bye.